Yeah, so there's several answers to this, and let's walk through each of them because this is precisely for people who most people have not been in the room for these decisions, and so this what I'm going to represent to you is the discussion that actually happens because I've seen it and I've been part of it a few times. So one is just like, look, and I'm going to steel man these, Ben, so that you can respond. It's like, look, like these are not just product development things. Like, yeah, when Boeing started, it was the main thing was building airplanes. But like today, it's basically like a nation state. Like it's this incredibly large, sprawling operation with like many different aspects of the business, many different plates that have to be spun to keep the thing running. It's and then the CEO has to kind of be everything all in one. But a big part of the CEO is they got to be like a diplomat. They've got to be able to represent the company. They've got to have like extraordinary general management skills. They've got a probably I don't even know 200,000 employee workforce. They've got to understand how to navigate everything from employment law to safety law to this to that. They've got to and then the shareholder thing. Look, the shareholders that we have are not interested in our 10-year. We don't have Elon's shareholders. They're not interested in our 10-year product roadmap. They're interested in our quarterly and annual earnings, and the company has to be optimized financially. And so we need somebody who's going to be able to do all that. And the kind of person who can do all that is somebody who has come up in a business or general management or maybe finance role. The problem with putting a product guy in charge is they've basically they spent their first 20 years in a lab, and then they've spent maybe 15 years or something being in charge of product development, but they just don't have the breadth of what's required to run a company like this.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting point because this is one of the things that we get into a lot in the firm, and that it's probably the core thing that I advise CEOs on what to do and what not to do. And it comes back to this thing that you and I talk about all the time, which is, do you hire for magnitude of strength or do you hire for lack of weakness? And I think in hiring executives or CEOs, you really have to start with, okay, there's 30 things they need to be able to do. But what do we need them to be world-class in? I.e., what do they have to be better than anybody else in the world in? And then how do we mitigate the things that aren't that? And I think if you don't start from there, you always get it wrong, because if you don't start from there, then you end up in exactly what you're talking about, which is, let's find a guy with no lack of weaknesses. Oh, he knows how to do this. Oh, he's talked to Wall Street. Oh, he's done this. Oh, he's done that. Oh, okay. But how hard is it really to talk to Wall Street? Can you not hire somebody to help you do that? Or is that really got to be the CEO? And I think that if you don't, or is what you really have to do, because the output of a CEO is decisions. And so what decisions can you not get wrong? And, and then that really come to the CEO. And I would say, top of that list has got to be like, the airplane doesn't fucking fall out of the sky. I mean, that would be number one for me. And so,
by the way, I've got my tea ready for comments like that. Yeah. So yes.
And so if you don't start there, then you're just going to end up with this kind of lack of weakness. They're not really great at what you need them to be great at, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And this is, I find this so often, and it's not just in CEOs, it's really in every executive position, but we do it a lot. Like in our business, we look at companies this way. If a company has nothing wrong with it, that's not a reason to invest. It has to have something truly great about it. And I think that the fact that, and I think, part of it is a board isn't, any competent person who's kind of has experience in hiring would think about it this way. But I think when you get into a committee, the problem with committees always is, this gets to another important point about hiring, is that they always go for lack of weakness, because it's the easiest thing to say. Oh, I want to talk. I know what I can say. I can see this thing that's wrong with that guy, right? But it's much harder to be so expert that you say, this person is better than anybody in the world at this. And this is the thing that we actually need, which is also why I think that for CEOs, you can't do consensus hiring, because you end up with lack of weakness. That is the output. At the end of the day, you can take input, but there's got to be a single decision maker who knows what the person has to be world-class in and knows how to assess that, and then can build the plan to mitigate, complement, deal with the things that the person isn't world class at. But those have to be the things that you don't need them to be. You can hire a CFO.
Yeah. So that actually goes to a second thing I would say, directly on point with what you just said. So the second thing is incentives at the board level.
Yeah.
So the incentive at the board level, the sort of board decision matrix for this kind of thing kind of looks, I won't draw it out, but it's basically, I make a good decision, bad decision, it goes well, it goes poorly, kind of thing. And it's like basically if I go for somebody who has no weaknesses, to your point, who's I'm optimizing for lack of weakness, then I'm making a quote safe choice. Yeah. That they may not be great, but they're probably not gonna destroy. There's no clear weaknesses, then they're not going to destroy it. So I'm sometimes you hear a term for this like steward, right? It's I'm gonna get somebody who's going to steward the thing, right?
Yeah, right.
Well, that's a big part of it, right? Because it's like, okay, look, our days of like, our days of inventing the next, widget are over. It's now a question of like, we got to keep the wheels on. And by the way, look, again, steel manning it, we have responsibilities. Like we have responsibilities, right? And we got like regulators and investors and all these people, and like we have responsibilities. Because if we take a little bit more risk, like if we take a little bit more risk and we get somebody who's spikier on the strengths and weaknesses, kind of grid, and they have stronger strengths, but maybe they don't have, like, for example, they haven't been in a finance line job before. And then they like screw up the Wall Street part, like then we're all just going to look like complete losers.
Yeah.
Right. And so you see what I'm saying is it's a very strong orientation towards risk aversion at that point at the board.
Of course, you also look like a loser if the airplane, the doors fall off the airplane while it's in the sky.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, I mean,
if you double down, if you do the various moves, if you do the boneheaded strategic moves.
Yeah. So this is like, I actually think this is a general kind of organizational psychology problem. And Andy Grove kind of remarked about it. And I think it was high output management when he talked about, well, you need people with ambition. Ambition is critical to get anything important done. But they have to have the right kind of ambition, meaning they have to be ambitious for the enterprise itself. It has to be like, you need people who want Boeing to be the best airplane manufacturer in the world and do important new things. You can't have it, I want prestige for myself for being on the Boeing board, and I don't want any kind of, heat about that, and I don't want to get criticized. Like once you get into that kind of thing, and I think this is, true in any organization, you really end up with bad decision making, because now you're no longer optimizing for the thing you should be optimizing for, which is a company. You're optimizing for the kind of individual ambition of the various members of the board or the kind of members of the executive team or whoever it is. And this is probably one of the most dangerous things in business, is when personal incentives start to override the goal of the organization. That and like it always happens to some degree, right? Because nobody is like a perfect all for the team in a sense, right? Like everybody cares about themselves to some degree, and when those interests start to diverge, it's problematic. But I think the job of leadership, the job of whoever the chairman of the board is, whoever's driving, who goes on the board, has to be how do you really get alignment between whatever anybody's ambition is and the ambition of the company? Because when that gets misaligned, you get exactly what you're talking about.
Right. Okay, so then the third thing I would say, and again, this is a very explicit conversation that will happen in the boardroom. It's almost, by the way, this is almost a given that just everybody just kind of accepts the following at big companies, which is basically, look, we have a career path for CEOs, and it starts with MBA. right? Like we have this concept in American business that basically being a CEO, being a general manager it's a general manager, masters in business administration, like these are generalized things. These are generalized skills.
Yeah.
And if I know how to run a soup company, I know how to run a car company, I know how to run a plane company, I know how to run a computer company. These are, because it's the running the company part that's the generalizable skill. What the product is, whatever. Like the whole point of being an MBA or a general manager or CEO is you can adapt to those things. And then I would say linked to that specifically, you asked the question up front, which is like, if Boeing's not in the business of making airplanes, what business is it in? And like Boeing is actually, for the most part, arguably not in the business of making airplanes, right? Like any more than like, PC companies are in the business of making PCs, right? Or car companies in the business of making cars, which is it's more of a supply chain integration company at this point than it is a primary airplane maker. Let me just talk about the car companies are like this. Like most of what goes into a car is coming from what they call their tier one supply chain, which are these integrated systems of everything in the car. The engineering and design is done by other people, and then you kind of put it together and put your name on it. The PC industry, as you know, works the exact same way, which is you're buying parts from half the time PC companies now, when they ship a PC, they haven't even designed the PC. They actually had what's called an ODM design the PC, which is a sort of outsourced design. And so these companies are basically supply chain integration and then financing, sales, and regulatory machines.
But this is precisely why GM is totally vulnerable to Tesla and BYD. This is why, HP ended up being totally vulnerable to Apple, because Apple was still building computers and HP was assembling computers, and GM is assembling cars, and Elon completely kind of re-engineered how you build a car. And, the product difference is dramatic if you are actually doing the thing as opposed to kind of, basically milking the cow. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I by the way, I think that general management, the way you describe it, is fake. And I don't think that, in my view, like if you can manage a soup company, you cannot manage, Meta. Like that's just not true. And by the way, if you can manage Meta, I'm not sure that like you can or would even have enough interest to manage a soup company. Like those are different things. The products really, really matter in terms of how you organize the operation, how you run it, the kinds of employees you have, how you can and can't talk to them. There's things tech workers, won't live by because they're in very high demand that like, maybe a manufacturing employee would deal with. Some companies have unions, and like union negotiations are a very different kind of skill set and so forth. So I think that the whole idea of that kind of general management is wrong. I think that there's one true kind of part of general management, which is, you have to learn how to manage. If any CEO has to learn how to manage people who are doing a job that they haven't done. So like, okay, now I'm a product person, I'm managing an HR person or a salesperson. So like, that's a skill you have to learn. But the decisions that come to a CEO always kind of relate back to what the company does. And so at a very deep level, the CEO has to understand what the company does. Like what the hell does it do? And look, you could be coming from a finance background and understand like at a deep, deep level what the company does, but that's the requirement. Or making a high quality decisions is very difficult because you do run into these things. Okay, I'm running GM and I'm going to run it like a car assembly plant, and I'm going to be caught with my pants totally around my ankles when like electric cars come, and there's nothing I can do about it. I'm stuck because I don't even know how to build cars really. I just know how to like run this thing that assembles cars.
Well, and by the way, look, and again, I'm a steel man, but like, look, the new CEO might say, look, this company stopped making cars 30 years ago.
Yeah.
They stopped designing cars 30 years ago. Like I can't, like I can't transform it into all of a sudden a different kind of company. I can't build a time machine, take it back to 60 years ago when it used to design cars.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, at that point, look, that's what John Madden used to call brown shoes and black socks. It's a give up. You were getting dressed and you just gave up.
Of course, these days, brown shoes and black socks would be a real overachievement in the fashion arts, but be the opposite of that. But
yeah, that's true.
The metaphor is still good.